hours from week to week. So you'll start to see the difference.
So what you're saying, Carl, is we're looking for net of all the federal and state aid cuts. We're looking for we'd be looking for 1,381,000 from the town, correct? And right now the town's basically saying they have about 480,000.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And again, it's really early, but we have to start doing this now. Hopefully tax revenues continue on the upswing, and there won't be, but many people who follow the budget for a long time are saying to expect a 5% cut for fiscal 12. Not for this year, hopefully. Not for this current fiscal year, but for fiscal year 12. So.
I'm glad we started this early. It gets the gears going in
Yep.
terms of prioritization of what's important to the district.
Any other questions?
These numbers seem like they're the same as they were last year. This feels like Groundhog Day all over again.
It really
That's
is.
what
It really is, and I think, I will say,
Maureen isn't here.
I've been reading on up on some of the other towns, and boy, we're in pretty good shape compared to other towns and the crises that they're facing in terms of funding. The town has done a good job, and we've done a good job being fairly conservative with spending, and, I mean, this is a challenge, but. I look
It's
at
down
some-
to the quality of the school committee in the town.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
School committee? Okay. I kind of agree with that. Thanks, Carl. Okay, next we have, Kathy presented her goals, last week, and one area of suggestion was to have a professional development goal added, and Kathy has done that tonight, so you wanna go over that, Kathy?
Yes, thank you, Nell. There's an additional goal, the fourth goal, and it states the superintendent will engage in professional development activities designed to contribute to the effectiveness of her role and the North Reading Public Schools. So you can see I provided a rationale about the importance of high-quality professional development. I'm not going to read that to you, but it does provide the framework for which I would propose the action plan that's been stated. And there are 3 major points in the action plan to maintain active participation in professional associations. And then I listed all of the associations where I'm involved or will be involved. The only one out of that list that I'm not yet involved in is the Harvard Roundtable. I had a conflict with their first meeting last week. So I do plan to participate in the Harvard Roundtable of superintendents. But I'm already involved in the Women's Education Leadership Network, and that's a partnership between the Department of Education and my professional organization of Mass Association of School Superintendents, and we were the initial Women's Leadership Network, so now we are mentoring other women leadership networks across the state. So I'm very happy about being a participant in that particular association. The second major section of the action plan is to participate in professional development programs, and then I've listed various programs that I will be participating in this year. The Executive Institute, Leadership Forums. I just attended the MASC-MASS Annual Joint Conference. I attend the midwinter and spring conferences that MASS puts out, and there is a summer retreat that I participate in with the Women's Education Leadership Network. I am involved this year as a new superintendent in the MASS new superintendent mentor program, and my mentor is Dr. Christine McGrath. She recently retired as a long-sitting superintendent in the Tewksbury Public School District, and I'm very pleased and very fortunate to have her as my mentor for this entire year. And then finally, I serve on professional boards of directors. There are 3 boards that on which I sit at this current time. The Northeast Consortium for Staff Development Board of Directors. I have also been the chair of that in the past, and I'm in my second of a 2-year term this year. I also sit on the North Shore Education Consortium Board of Directors, as well as the SEAM Collaborative Board of Directors. And then there's an assessment process that's been listed below.
This is exactly what I was looking for. I think this is, any questions? So could I have
Good.
could I have a motion that we approve the amended goals for the superintendent, adding the professional development goal?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, seconded by Ms. Arquette. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have a brief report I'm sorry, Karen, I had to say brief report. We have a brief report. Karen and Kathy attended the MASC, M-A-S-S annual meeting, is it called?
The Mask and Mass.
MASC and MASC.
Annual Joint Conference.
Annual joint conference.
In Hyannis.
Oh, good getaway.
It was a getaway. Wasn't too bad of a trip. It was a little stormy down there. Kathy and I attended, I'll use that word loosely because Kathy was sick for part of the conference,
Yes.
unfortunately. But it was a very worthwhile event. I attended a lot of different sessions, and I think the one I got the most out of, well, there were two that I got the most out of. One was the communications panel, which really focused on providing school committee members tools to think about how to communicate with different media outlets. And there was a rather engaging discussion about whether a school committee should in fact be on Facebook. So it turned into, how do you talk to the press to, should you have a Facebook account to promote the school district? And so that was a very interesting discussion. But what I took from that was sort of ways of engaging different media, as well as how we as a committee should communicate. So one of the suggestions was to develop a subcommittee for communications. So we are
We already have that.
moving forward with that. I'm like,
Right.
go North Reading. Thinking ahead. But the other piece of it too was that they suggested doing some team building with the school committee around sentinel events, public events that potentially could be very high awareness, and for the committee to think about those events before they occur and how they would communicate with each other about those events. That every member of the school committee needs to have their own perspective as representatives, but that the response should be a team approach. So there were a number of recommendations as to how to achieve that. I have some high-level notes I'll be sharing with all of you. The other session I attended that I thought was, well, I went to a couple, but this one, for the sake of brevity, Mel, we'll talk about the legislative updates. I found this session to be very engaging because it really was very representative of a wide spectrum of school committees and school committee members and superintendents. There were a lot of members from vocational school committees involved as well, so it was a very riveting discussion with, from my perception, very liberal representatives from the state Senate and the House. The discussion really focused around not around the budget per se, but about the culture in the legislature being focused on solving some concrete problems in how schools are, how education is funded, how it is prioritized, and one of the big ticket items was the circuit breaker. In fact, that got very heated, and people were asked to sit down. So it was kind of, pay for the circuit breaker was the big message. But I think there's a loud and clear message that the legislature needs to think about education differently. They were asked more than once whether, as the sitting party, whether they had learned any lessons. This was asked in many different ways from people of all different political persuasions. And I think the idea was, it was sort of messages heard, we'll go and do some, make some changes. But I didn't hear anything concrete that said that they were going to make some changes. One big topic, though, they did say they were going to look at was regionalization of transportation. But this doesn't really apply to us. So, and then the budget message was, okay, well, we all know we're going to have to cut budgets, and they wouldn't firmly commit on helping us out in any way. They were like, we'll just anticipate cuts. And the income tax question, not the income tax question, the sales tax question was dodged as something that they weren't even considering. So I didn't hear any good messages, and most of the people who were in that room were dissatisfied. So,
I know next week, and I don't know what day it is, that,
Well, it's second.
the second, I think there's gonna be a meeting with the Suburban Coalition.
Good.
And Michael Widmer is gonna be there to talk about budget and
Good.
tax
And Kathy actually
issues.
attended a session that I think she's gonna tell us about.
I did. I managed to pull it together and get down to Fiscal Friday because I knew that Michael Widmer, who is the executive director of the Massachusetts Taxpayers Association, would be addressing the assembly regarding the budget. So he did talk an awful lot about what needed to happen as we think about what's coming. He talked about 4 major points: a critical need to place a cap on soaring and unsustainable health insurance and pension costs. He talked about a minimum $2 billion structural deficit for the state in FY12, possibly higher at $2.5 billion with escalation of Medicare charges. On the plus side, revenues this fiscal year to date are $600 million ahead of estimates. And while about $500 million in the state's rainy day funds remain, it may be needed to replace the funds applied from that account to this year's budget. So a portion of state revenue surpluses must go to this fund as a new and needed requirement of the law. So he did talk about planning for an estimated cut in local aid. At first, he said 10%. But he said there's a possibility of that cut being 5% if revenues continue to grow at the rate experienced in the first quarter of this year. And then he went on to provide more details, but that was essentially what we took out of Michael Widmer's presentation on Fiscal Friday.
We also should report, we had one of our former school committee members honored at the event, correct?
Yes, Maureen Hardy-Vaca was inducted as a lifetime member into MASC, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. I actually wasn't able to attend that, even though I was scheduled to do so, but Maureen was honored and had a good weekend. She actually attended some of the sessions that Saturday, so including the resolution that was passed. She was very excited about that because she had been involved on the committee when we were approached about supporting that circuit breaker resolution. So congratulations to Maureen. I'm sure she's watching us right now.
Sure she is, holding her granddaughter.
Yeah.
That's a great report, and in terms of those communications notes, we have a subcommittee meeting on the 13th, so if you could
Sure.
get whatever you have together for me, Cliff, and Kathy, because that is a good idea to have group responses to, have the group prepared to respond in unison to, certain events that might happen, and everybody understands you also have your own opinion, but as a school committee, we also have to respond to things.
Well, I think the idea was that there are certain situations which I won't say are typical, but that as school committee members, we want to think through how we would react and how we would want the school committee to be represented and how each member would contribute to that one message, that take-home message. And it's pretty much unified with the district's response, but it's also important to ensure that every representative on the committee has their voice, because they are representing constituency, and they can say what they want, but there may be some guidelines around how to react to very disturbing events that might occur, and so anyway.
Okay. Questions? Great. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Kathy. Next, we have a kindergarten switch at the Hood School.
Yes. I have been approached by Principal Glenn McKay to explore the option of not moving the only session of kindergarten from the AM to the PM at the midpoint of this year. As you know, in this district, it's a long-standing procedure when there are half-day kindergarten sessions in a school that the AM switches to the PM and then the PM switches to the AM. And at the Batchelder School as well as at the Little School, there's an AM session and a PM session. Only at the Hood School is there no PM session, only an AM session of kindergarten. So the principal is in the process of talking with the parent. The parents approached him and asked if they would not have to switch this year. I can also tell you that there are some services that are being provided to students in that AM class that fit into a larger schedule that would need to be restructured if we moved that AM session to the PM session. So there's another convenience factor of making sure that we are able to provide services that are currently in place. But I'm requesting that the school committee consider that if the principal is able to make sure that this is not gonna create a hardship for any parent or student in the half-day kindergarten class, that for this year, we not switch the AM to the PM